Okay? Right. Good afternoon. We are in the last part of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, after the passing away. And it's Saturday, April 9th, 1887. The members of the Mat were resting a little after their meal. Narendra and M sat under a tree in the garden to the west of the monastery. It was a solitary place, and no one else was present. Narendra was recounting to M his various experiences with Sri Ramakrishna. Narendra was about 24 years old and M 32. M, you must remember vividly your first visit to him. Narendra, yes. It was at the temple garden at Dakshineshwar in his own room. That day I sang 2 songs. Narendra sang them for M. Let us go back once more, O mind, to our own abode. Here in this foreign land of earth, why should we wander aimlessly in strangers' guise? These living beings round about and the 5 elements are strangers to you, all of them. None is your own. Why do you thus forget yourself? In love with strangers, O my mind, why do you thus forget your own? Ascend the path of truth, O mind, unflaggingly climb, with love as the lamp to light your way. As your provision for the journey, bring with you the virtues, carefully concealed. For like 2 highwaymen, greed and delusion wait to rob you of your wealth, and keep beside you constantly as guards to shelter you from harm, calmness of mind, and self-control. Companionship with holy men will be for you a welcome rest house by the road. There rest your weary limbs a while, asking your way. If ever you should be in doubt of him who watches there, if anything along the path should frighten you, then loudly shout the name of the Lord, for he is ruler of the road, and even death must bow to him. O Lord, must all my days pass by so utterly in vain? Down the path of hope I gaze with longing day and night. Thou art the Lord of all the worlds, and I but a beggar here. How can I ask of thee to come and dwell within my heart? My poor heart's humble cottage door is standing open wide. Be gracious, Lord, and enter there but once, and quench its thirst. M, what did he say after listening to your songs? Narendra, he went into samadhi. He said to Rambabu, who is this boy? How well he sings. He asked me to come again. M, where did you see him next? Narendra, at Raj Mohan's house. The 3rd visit was at Dakshineshwar again. During that visit, he went into samadhi and began to praise me as if I were a god. He said to me, O Narayana, you have assumed this body for my sake, but please don't tell this to anybody else. What else did he say? Narendra, he said, you have assumed this body for my sake. I asked the Divine Mother, Mother, unless I enjoy the company of some genuine devotees, completely free from lust and greed, how shall I live on earth? Then he said to me, you came to me at night, woke me up and said, here I am. But I did not know anything of this. I was sound asleep in our Calcutta house. M, in other words, you may be both present and absent at the same time. It is like God who is both formless and endowed with form. Narendra, you must not tell this to anyone else. At Kasipur, he transmitted his power to me. M, didn't it happen when you used to meditate before a lighted fire under a tree at the Kasipur garden house? Narendra, yes. One day while meditating, I asked Kali to hold my hand. Kali said to me, when I touched your body, I felt something like an electric shock coming to my body. But you must not tell this to anybody here. Give me your promise. M. There is a special purpose in this transmission of power to you. He will accomplish much work through you. One day the Master wrote on a piece of paper, Naren will teach people. Narendra. But I said to him, I won't do any such thing. Thereupon he said, your very bones will do it. He has given me charge of Sharat. Sharat is now yearning for God. The Kundalini is awakened in him. M. He must be careful that dead leaves do not accumulate there. Perhaps you remember what the Master used to say. In a lake the fish make holes so that they may rest there. But if dead leaves accumulate in the holes, the fish do not go there. Narendra. The Master used to call me Narayana. M. Yes, I know he did. Narendra. When he was ill, he would not allow me to pour water to wash his hands. At Kasipur, he said, now the key is in my hands. He will give up his body when he knows who he is. M. Didn't he say it when you were near Vikalpa Samadhi? Narendra. Yes. At the time it seemed to me I had no body. I felt only my face. I was studying law at home to prepare for the examinations. Suddenly I said to myself, what am I doing? M. Didn't it happen that the Master was at Kasipur? Narendra. Yes. Like an insane person, I ran out of our house. He asked me, what do you want? I replied, I want to remain immersed in Samadhi. He said, what a small mind you have. Go beyond Samadhi. Samadhi is a very trifling thing. I'm sure most of us wouldn't mind that trifling thing. M. Yes, he used to say that Vijnana is the stage after Jnana. It is like going up and down the stairs after reaching the roof. Narendra. Kali has a craving for knowledge. I scold him for that. Is knowledge so easy to get? Let his bhakti first mature. The Master told Tarak at Dakshineshwar that emotion and bhakti are by no means the last word. Now, everyone knows that Kali is Swami Abhedananda and Tarak is Swami Shivananda, whom we're reading about For Seekers of God. M. What other things did he say about you? Narendra. Once I said to him, the forms of God and things like that, which you see in your visions, are all figments of your imagination. He had so much faith in my words that he went to the Divine Mother in the temple and told her what I had said to him. He asked her, are these hallucinations then? Afterwards he said to me, Mother told me that all these are real. Perhaps you remember that he said to me, when you sing, he who dwells here, touching his heart, like a snake, hisses as it were, and then spreading his hood quietly holds himself steady and listens to your music. He has no doubt said many things about me, but what have I realized? M. Now you have put on the garb of Shiva. You cannot touch money. Do you remember the Master's story? Narendra, please tell it to me. M. Vahurupi, professional impersonator, disguised himself as Shiva and visited a house. The master of the house wanted to give him a rupee, but he did not accept it. Then the mendicant went home, removed his disguise, came back to the gentleman, and asked for the rupee. Why didn't you accept it before, he was asked. He said, I was impersonating Shiva, a sannyasini. I couldn't touch money at that time. When Narendra heard the story, he laughed a long while. M. You have now put on the garb of a physician, as it were. You have become the guardian of these young men. Yours is the entire responsibility. You have to bring up the brothers of your monastery. Narendra. Whatever spiritual disciplines we are practicing here are in obedience to the Master's command. But it is strange that Ram Babu criticizes for our spiritual practices. He says, "We have seen him, Ramakrishna. What need have we for any such practice?" M. Let people act according to their faith. Narendra. But the Master asked us to practice sadhana. Narendra was again telling him about the Master's love for him. Narendra, how many times he prayed to the Divine Mother for my sake. After my father's death, when I had no food at home and my mother and sisters and brothers were starving too, the Master prayed to the Divine Mother to give me money. M. Yes, I know that. You once told me. Narendra, but I didn't get any money. The Master told me what the Divine Mother had said to him. He will get simple food and clothing. He will eat rice and dal. He loved me so much, but whenever an impure idea crept into my mind, he at once knew about it. While going around with Anada sometimes, I found myself in the company of evil people. On those occasions, the Master could not eat any food from my hands. He could raise his hand only a little and could not bring it to his mouth. On one such occasion, while he was ill, he brought his mouth very close to his mouth, but it did not go in. He said to me, "You are not ready. You are not yet ready." Now and then I feel great skepticism. At Baburam's house, it seemed to me that nothing existed, as if there were no such thing as God. M. The Master used to say that he too had passed through that mood. Both M and Narendra remained silent. Then M said, "You are all indeed blessed. You think of the Master day and night." Narendra, but how little it is. We don't yet feel like giving up the body because we haven't realized God. It was night. Niranjan had just returned from Puri. The members of the Mat and M greeted him with great joy. Niranjan was telling them his experiences. He was then about 25 years old. The evening worship was over. Some of the brothers were meditating, but many of them were assembled in the big hall around Niranjan. They were talking. After 9 o'clock, Sashi offered food to the deity. The members of the Mat finished their supper, which consisted of homemade bread, a little vegetable, and a little hard molasses. Saturday, May 7th, 1887. It was the full moon day of the month of Vaishak. Narendra and M were seated on a couch in M's study in Calcutta. They were talking. Just before M's arrival, M had been studying The Merchant of Venice, Comus, and Blackie's Self-Culture, which he taught at school. Okay. Narendra and the other brothers of the monastery were full of yearning for God realization. A fire of intense renunciation raged in their hearts. Narendra, I don't care for anything. You see, I am now talking with you, but I feel like getting up this minute and running away. Narendra sat in silence for a few minutes, then he said, I shall fast to death for the realization of God. M. That is good. One can do anything for God. Narendra. But suppose I cannot control my hunger. M. Then eat something and begin over again. Remember Vivekananda said fail again, fail bigger, and keep going. Narendra remained silent a few minutes. Narendra, it seems there is no God. I pray so much that there is no reply, none whatsoever. How many visions I have seen, how many mantras shining in letters of gold, how many visions of the goddess Kali, how many other divine forms, but still I have no peace. Will you kindly give me 6 pice? Narendra asked for the money to pay his carriage hire to the Bharanagore Math. Just then, Satkari arrived in a carriage. Of the same age as Narendra, he dearly loved the members of the monastery. He lived near the Math and worked in Calcutta. The carriage was his own. Narendra returned the money to M and said that he would go with Satkari in his carriage. He asked M to give them some refreshments. M accompanied the 2 friends to the Bharanagore Math. He wanted to see how the brothers spent their time and practiced sadhana. He wanted to see how Sri Ramakrishna, the master, was reflected in the hearts of the disciples. Niranjan was not at the Math. He had gone home to visit his mother, the only relative he had in the world. Baburam, Sharat, and Kali had gone to Puri. They intended to spend a few days there. Narendra was in charge of the members of the monastery. Prasanna, and this is Sarda Prasanna, one of the master's young disciples, had been practicing severe sadhana for the past few days. Once Narendra had told him of his desire to fast to death for the realization of God. During Narendra's absence in Calcutta, Prasanna had left the monastery for an unknown destination. When Narendra heard about it, he said to the brothers, "Why did Raja allow him to go?" But Rakhal had not been in the monastery at the time, having gone to the Dakshineshwar temple for a stroll. Narendra, "Just let Raja come back to the monastery. I shall scold him. Why did he allow Prasanna to go away?" To Harish, "I am sure you were lecturing him then, standing with your feet apart. Couldn't you prevent his going away?" Harish replied, that's quite a picture, Harish standing in front of him with his legs apart lecturing. Harish replied in a very low voice. Brother Tarak asked him not to go, but still he went away. Narendra to M. "You see what a lot of trouble I am in? Here, too, I am involved in a world of Maya. Who knows where this boy has gone?" Rakhal returned from Dakshineshwar. Bhavanath had accompanied him. Narendra told Rakhal about Prasanna's going away from the monastery. Prasanna had left a letter for Narendra. This was the substance of the letter. "I am going to Vrindavan on foot. It is very risky for me to live here. Here my mind is undergoing a change. Formerly, I used to dream about my parents and their relatives. Then I dreamt of woman, the embodiment of Maya. I have suffered twice. I had to go back to my relatives at home. Therefore, I am going far away from them. The master once told me, 'Your people at home are apt to do anything. Never trust them.'" Rakhal said, "These are the reasons for his going away." Once he remarked, "Narendra often goes home to look after his mother, brothers, and sisters, and he supervises the family's lawsuit. I am afraid that I too may feel like going home, following his example." Narendra remained silent. Rakhal was talking to them about making pilgrimages. He said, "We have achieved nothing by staying here. The master always exhorted us to realize God. Have we succeeded?" Rakhal lay down. The other devotees were lying down or sitting. Rakhal, "Let us go to the Narmada." Narendra, "What will you achieve by wandering about? Can one ever attain jnana? Can anyone ever attain jnana that you are talking about it so much?" A devotee, "Then why have you renounced the world?" Narendra, "Must we live with Shyam because we have not seen Ram? Must we go on begetting children because we have not realized God? What are you talking about?" Narendra went out, returning after a few minutes. Rakhal was still lying down. A member of the monastery, who was also lying down, said teasingly, feigning great suffering on account of his separation from God. Ah, please get me a knife. I have no more use for this life. I can't stand this pain anymore. Narendra, feigning seriousness, it is there. Stretch out your hand and take it. Everybody laughed. The conversation again turned to Prasanna. Narendra, even here we are involved in Maya. Why have we become sannyasis? I wonder. Rakal, I have read in a book that sannyasis should not live together. The author has described a city of sannyasis. Shashi, I don't care about sannyas or any such thing. There is no place where I cannot live. They were talking of Bhavanat, whose wife had become seriously ill. Narendra said to Rakal, I understand that his wife has been snatched from the jaws of death. Is that why he went to Dakshineshwar to enjoy the fresh air? Rambabu intended to build a temple in the garden at Kankargachi, where some of Sri Ramakrishna's ashes were buried. Narendra to Rakal. Rambabu has made M one of the trustees of the garden. M to Rakal, but I don't know anything about it. It was dusk. Sashi burnt incense before the picture of Sri Ramakrishna in the worship room, and then before the pictures of gods and goddesses in the other rooms. The evening worship began. The members of the Mat and other devotees stood with folded hands near the door of the shrine and witnessed the arati. Then they all sang in chorus the following hymn to Shiva, to the accompaniment of bell and gong. Jaya Shiva Omkara, Bhaja Shiva Omkara, Brahma Vishnu Sadashiva Hara Hara Mahadev. Narendra had introduced this song for the evening worship. It is sung in the temple of Shiva in Benares. It was 11 o'clock at night when their supper was over. 11 o'clock at night, I want you to all to listen to that, when their supper was over, and they get up at 3. It was midnight, and M was wide awake. He said to himself, everything is as it was before, the same Ayodhya, only Rama is not here. M silently left his bed. It was the full moon night of Vaishak, the thrice blessed day of the Buddhists, associated with Buddha's birth, realization, and passing away. M was walking alone on the bank of the Ganga, contemplating the Master. Okay, you can read a little more, unless anyone has any comments or questions. No? Okay. It was Sunday. M had arrived the day before and was planning to stay till Wednesday. The householder devotees generally visited the monastery on Sundays. The Yoga Vashishta was being studied and explained. M had heard a little about the teachings of this book from Sri Ramakrishna. It taught the absolute identity of Brahman and the soul, and the unreality of the world. The Master had forbidden him and the other householder devotees to practice spiritual discipline following the method of the Advaita Vedanta, since the attitude of the oneness of the soul and God is harmful for one still identified with the body. For such a devotee, the Master used to say, it was better to look on God as the Lord and oneself as his servant. The conversation turned to the Yoga Vashishta. M. Well, how is Brahmagyana described in the Yoga Vashishta? Rakal. Hunger, thirst, pain, pleasure, and so on are all Maya. The annihilation of the mind is the only means to the realization of Brahman. M. What remains after the annihilation of the mind? What remains after the annihilation of the mind is Brahman. Is that not true? Rakal. Yes. M. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that. Nunta taught him that way. Have you found in the book about Vashishta that Vashishta asked Rama to lead a householder's life? Rakal, I haven't found anything like that in the book. Rama is not even admitted by the author to be an incarnation of God. Presently, Narendra, Tarak, and another devotee returned from the bank of the Ganga. They had intended to go to Kanagar on the other side of the river, but had been unable to find a ferry boat. They sat down. The conversation about the Yoga Vashishta went on. Narendra to M. There are many nice stories in the book. Do you know the incident of Leela? M. Yes, I have read the book here and there. Leela had attained Brahmagyan. Narendra. Yes. Do you remember the story of Indra and Ahalya and the story of how King Vidurata became a Chandala? M. Yes, I remember. Narendra. What a wonderful description of the forest. Narendra and the other devotees were going to the Ganga to bathe. M accompanied them. The sun was very hot, so M took his umbrella. Sharat, a devotee from Baranagar, was going with them to take his bath. He often visited the monastery. M to Sharat. It is very hot. Narendra. Is that your excuse for taking the umbrella? M laughed. The members of the monastery were clad in Garawa. M to Narendra. It is really very hot. One is liable to get a sunstroke. Narendra. I see that your body is the obstacle in your path of renunciation. Isn't that so? I mean you, Devendra Babu. M laughed and said to himself, is it merely the body? After bathing, the devotees returned to the monastery. They washed their feet and entered the worship room. Saluting the deity, they offered flowers. Narendra was a little late in coming to the worship room. He found that there was no flower on the tray. There were only a few bell leaves. He sprinkled the leaves with sandal paste and offered them to Sri Ramakrishna. He rang the bell, saluted the deity again, and joined the other brothers in the big hall, which was known as the Room of the Danas. The members of the Mat called themselves the Danas and the Doityas, which mean the ghosts and the demons, the companions of Shiva. They took these names because of their utter indifference to worldly pleasures and relationships. I think we'll stop there this evening, and next Saturday we'll take up a description, a continued description of their rooms and their daily practices. Well, maybe this is not a good place to stop. I'm going to read 2 more paragraphs. The southernmost room of the second floor was used for meditation, contemplation, and study, and was known as Kali Tapasya's room, since Kali used to shut himself in there most of the day. North of this room was the worship room, and north of that, again, was the room where the offerings for the worship were prepared. From this room, the devotees used to watch the evening worship. North of the offering room was the room of the Danas, a very long hall where the members of the Mat used to assemble. Here the householder devotees and visitors were received. North of this hall was a small room where the devotees took their meals. East of the worship room and of Kali Tapasya's room ran a long veranda, at the southwest corner of which was the library of a society of Baranagar. Between Kali Tapasya's room and this library was a staircase, and north of the dining room was another staircase leading to the roof. Narendra and the other members of the Mat often spent their evenings on this roof. There they devoted a great deal of time to discussion of the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna, Shankaracharya, Ramanuja, and Jesus Christ, and of Hindu philosophy, European philosophy, the Vedas, the Puranas, and the Tantras. Narendra, who had a beautiful voice, used to sing in the room of the Danas and teach music to Sarat and a few others. Kali used to take lessons on the instruments. Many, many happy hours were spent together in that hall, dancing and singing. And we'll stop there for this evening. Okay, tomorrow we'll have a talk on the potholes of life. We're encountering a great many of them in Santa Barbara right now. Literally on the road, the potholes of life. Next Saturday, we will have a reading of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna at 5 o'clock. And then we will have the Swamiji Puja on the 25th, which is Tuesday? Tuesday the 25th. Swamiji's Puja will begin at 11 a.m. both in person and online. Hope to see you if you can get here, or hope to see you online. Okay. We'll end with the chant. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.